Those of you who were with us at the first Kin Global in 2009 recall the Minister of Defense, Juan Manuel Santos, who was with us. He was invited by Pablo and joined us to talk about the rise of Colombia from many years of very significant challenge. As many of you also know, he has since become the president of Colombia, and he has staked his political legacy, truly legacy, on achieving lasting peace for Colombia and for the region. It's impossible to overemphasize how important this process is and how vital the impact is on the country and the region, and in many ways, all of us. So with that, I'm just going to turn it over to Pablo to have a conversation with Elvira, who has been selected by President Santos to be part of the leadership to implement the Colombian peace process. Pablo and Elvira.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Well, Elvira Maria, my sister, as you now know, a bit of nepotism here. A good Colombian tradition, yes. We're incorporating that as innovation into the kin. Yeah. My sister has been studying crime, violence, and peace building for most of her professional life. As Rob was saying, we invited President Santos for the first Kin Global, that's 7 years ago, and Colombia was featured as the country for that year. We were interested in President Santos, then the Minister of Defense, former Minister of Defense, I might say, because he had applied a lot of innovation into the military. And of course, that's, at least in Colombia, is a challenge. He told us some anecdotes, very interesting anecdotes of how he streamlined communication, how he improved the intelligence, the intelligence and counterintelligence with the help of MI6 from the British and Mossad from Israel. So we thought he was a great military innovator. Now I think it is very different to be a military innovator where you get, if you do things well, like Operación Jaque, which they're making a movie in Hollywood of that, Operación Checkmate, you get immediate results, you get immediate media impact. Now he needs to be a peace-building innovator, and that's a whole different story, because you need to make midterm, you need to accept that you're making midterm and long-term impact. And he's also playing, he's staking his whole legacy on the peace process. So, and I think and my sister will speak to that, he has spent a lot of political capital in the peace process. So what I would like, if you may, Elvira Maria, is tell us where you see Colombia now and where you see the peace process right now.
Okay, so thank you all for being here. And I'm really excited to share this stage with my brothers. The first time, that is the first, so there's no nepotism there. So I think it's a very interesting moment for Colombia. Historically, I think we are in a very challenging moment too. I am pretty certain that the peace process with the FARC, between the government of Colombia and the FARC, is going to be signed very soon. It is a very innovative peace process in the sense that President Santos, when he began, he asked a team of experts, both native and international experts, to go and find out about all the successful peace processes that have been around the world and learn from this and innovate and correct their mistakes. So this is what he did, and I think this is, to me, it represents a model of peace process. Whether it's successful or not is another matter, but the peace process itself is certainly a great innovation. Mm-hmm.
And as we know, innovators are copiers a lot of the time. So I understand that there's a lot of effort and time spent by President Santos and his team to make this sustainable peace-building effort, sustainable economically, sustainable socially, sustainable environmentally. He has looked at other peace processes and other conflicts and copied from their successes and learned from their failures. Why do you feel this is a particularly innovative peace process, particularly when Colombia has gone through 20?
Right. Well, as you said, we've had 20, so we've had a lot of
Well,
expertise
failure
and
is
learning.
part of innovation, right?
Mainly failures, but we have some successes too. Well, I think there are several reasons for it to be a model. I would say the first one, which we just mentioned, is the innovation, is the looking at the best practices of other countries and trying to adapt and correct the failures. The second thing that I think is very important and I think is very unique to Colombia is to put the victims at the center of the process. The victims are truly the clients. We're talking about 7.9 million victims, which represent 15% of the Colombian population. So this is a unique feature of the Colombian peace process. Another feature that I think is very important is the transparency and publicity to which this process, that informs this process. All the pre-agreements, because we have not agreed anything so far, but all the pre-agreements that have been drafted are freely accessible online. 24 hours a day. It's not like they lock it for the weekend. It's always there. The peace process as well, and this is another important thing, complies with international legal standards. Otherwise, it would not be sustainable because there was also the International Criminal Court that could come up. So this is very important. And also, it has adopted and respects the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. So the discourse of human rights is very present in the process. There's another principle that you know very well of because you are an expert negotiator, and it's that the golden rule of this process is that everything is agreed.
Nothing is agreed.
Nothing is agreed until everything is agreed. Sorry about that. So that is the golden peace process, and you know that. That is and finally, I would say, and that's something that we could discuss a little bit further, it is a sustainable peace process. Sustainable socially, sustainable economically, and hopefully environmentally. But that is not my field.
Okay. So, yes, I mean, I think those are 6 very interesting points in innovation. I mean, learning from other processes. Customer-centric process, if you want, when you're putting the victims at the center, and I think that's one of the most interesting approaches. Transparency complies with international law, of course, best practices in negotiation, and sustainable peace process. I want to ask you a bit more about the victims, but before that, why don't you give us an overview of the conflict so people understand, people here understand. Can you? Yeah.
I have to go back because it was on.
Okay.
I must have clicked it.
Explícalo.
No, but I need to go to the slide before.
Okay.
No, I'm sorry.
Two
about it.
clicks. Yeah,
That's
there we
it. Sorry, that was the slide that I wanted to show you. So for those of you who are not familiar with the Colombian conflict, this is a 50-year-old conflict. And I like to use this because it's a 3 players soccer. It exists, actually, here in the US.
Really?
Yes,
Okay.
And it's pretty difficult with rules. So imagine competition and cooperation without rules, which is basically the conflict. I would say that on the left we can put the guerrillas, the left-wing guerrillas. There are 2 at the moment. On the right-wing paramilitaries, and at the bottom center, the armed forces. All these 3 actors have participated in the conflict and obviously have caused the amount of victims and casualties that are there. It's very difficult to determine who is responsible for what. And this is why we can say there are some signature crimes. We could say that the disappearances are mainly paramilitary practices, the kidnappings are guerrilla practices, and the extrajudicial killings are mainly armed forces actors. But it is hard to determine who does what. Now I need the other one. There's my problem here. So this is an animated map of Colombia constructed by a big team of people. And what it does is those circles there are showing you and each of the actors. And I cannot read from here, so I think the yellows, I didn't bring my glasses, that's really bad.
The yellow is the top one, the blue is the next one, the green and the blue.
Yeah, but I need to tell you what they are.
So the yellow, sorry.
So the yellow are the combat, I'm sorry about this, the combats between the government and the guerrilla, they are the only bilateral combats, so you can see them there. The attacks by the paramilitary, which are unilateral, are blue, and the green are the attacks by the guerrilla. The red circles are the overall killings in this confrontation. recognition. And this is, as you can see, a day's map. And it shows the difficulty of understanding this conflict. It's not a vertical conflict of the armed forces against the subversives. It is a conflict that is messy. It is a conflict where even trying to determine who caused these casualties is complicated. And this is one of the main issues that has been taken into account in this process.
And you haven't mentioned the drug traffic to
Oh,
that.
and I haven't added the drug trafficking. Thank you so much.
Okay. So I hope that helps understand how complex the conflict is and how it is more of a horizontal conflict than a vertical conflict. Going back to what we were looking at, the innovations aspect, I mean, you talked about the victims. I mean, we're talking about crimes against humanity against 8 million people in Colombia. How is the retribution going to happen? What is going to happen in terms of retribution? I mean, that's the essence of the process.
This is one of the most innovative parts of the peace process, how to determine, how to manage this responsibility. And this is why I wanted to take some time to show you the messiness of this. The first thing is to acknowledge that the FARC are not the only perpetrators. And this sounds like a very simple thing, but it is actually a crucial thing that has distinguished the Colombian peace process from many other peace processes in the world. By prosecuting only one side, one leaves open the doors for revenge and for conflict reignition. This perhaps has happened in places that we think are calm now, like Bosnia. Bosnia, for example, only prosecuted the Serbs, mainly in the International Criminal Tribunal of Yugoslavia. So they didn't want this to happen. The second thing is that it's practically impossible to prosecute everyone. Let's even think that we could identify who did all that. So it's practically impossible. And there was as well a moral imperative to prosecute some people and to have some form of justice for the victims. So what they did, and what I think is very important, is that they established a special form of justice where the leaders will be the ones that had decision-making capacity would face this special justice. If they truthfully confess what they did, they would have an alternative penalty that would be served as a form of community service, for example, demining Colombia or eradicating drug trafficking. Those who do not confess will go straight to the criminal system of justice and would be in jail and pay for that. And this actually corrects South Africa. South Africa gave an amnesty for those that came forward and confessed to their crimes, but they had no incentive to do so. So Colombia thought we have to create an incentive, and the incentive is if you don't tell us the truth, you don't come forward, you go to jail. And that is a big incentive and a big change. So this is the novelty in terms of the responsibility.
So in innovation, we're always saying that you're trying to solve dilemmas that seem to be unsolvable. Here, you're presenting a couple of dilemmas. The first one is, it makes sense, I mean, is justice or peace? And what you're saying is, if you want to be realistic, if you want the guerrilla or another armed groups to stop fighting, you have to give them an attractive option to leave the weapons. But on the other hand, you want justice, and the victims and the victims need justice for this to be sustainable, right?
Yes.
So there is a trade-off between peace and justice, in which we are finding a good balance that will work. But there's also, and you said this, a trade-off between justice and pardon. And you say that the victims, if truth is told, will feel somehow retributed. Do you really believe that?
It's not really what I believe. This is what the victims think. These are two very symbolic victims in Colombia. To the left is Sigifredo Lopez, who was kidnapped by the FARC after an atrocious episode where they tried to take over the Asamblea Departamental. He was a deputy, and they killed 11 of the 12. He was the only survivor, and the FARC did this. And to the right is Ginette Bedoya, who was kidnapped, tortured, and raped by the paramilitaries. They too represent symbolically lots of victims of Colombia. And they both, if you manage to read there, prefer, and they overtly prefer, truth over justice to overcome what they've been through. But this is not just the two victims that are symbolic. There are plenty of surveys that have shown that victims in the world from any conflicts, from any nature, overwhelmingly prefer the truth and some form of reparation over justice. So this is actually empirical.
So there seem to be different forms of retribution. One is justice, one is listening to the truth, to pardon, or to be healed. But reading your paper of women victims, peace builder leaders, you talk about something very interesting, which is what you call unthought of peace-building actors. And what it seems is there's another way of indirect retribution, which is opening to the victims opportunities they did not have before, right? And particularly also is empowering them to contribute to the peace process and find another type of retribution by changing their life. And this also, from reading your paper, happens because the whole belief system has changed, because the structure, the patriarchal structure of Colombia has changed.
Yes, thank you so much. I mean, this is a paper that I just finished, and I just wanted to play the woman card because...
Just for the sake of it.
We see...
Yes, but yeah, she didn't tell me about this.
This is a surprise for my brother. Basically, what happened is that I started looking at women as victims. As most of the case, women are always at a disadvantageous place, even in terms of wages in this lovely nation. So by looking at the stories of women victims of conflict, I was just trying to see how they perceived and how they thought themselves and saw the process. And I realized there that there was an untapped resource of potential peace-building women leaders that have emerged from all sorts of victimizations that, I mean, I feel even humble to tell their stories. This is Maria, who is just a woman that has resisted the conflict for many years and is a survivor of many violences. But rather than talking about Maria's story, which is long and I'm looking at the time, I just want to share with you that this untaught peace-building women are the result of both conflict and the opportunities that the peace process is bringing to them. Conflict, because conflict has forced Colombian women out of their rural homes into the cities. That's where they flee, and they have lost their partners to the war, or they are combatants. And when they arrive to the cities, they are faced with a lot of hardship, but the cities have, because of all this structure, open up opportunities for them, opportunities for education, opportunities for work, and opportunities to regain. By joining together, they have become themselves organized. There are thousands of organizations. I was totally surprised when I look at this. Hundreds and thousands of organizations of women leaders that are not only healing others, because by healing others they heal themselves, but that have become to me this social capital that is untapped and inexpensive and an innovation to exploit in order to rebuild a country that is very scarred by the war. The war has left, and any society that has been to the levels of violence that Colombia has been to not only needs to heal its people, but you actually need to sustain the conflict by looking and tapping at the moral part of the conflict, not just the material. It's not just about resources and overcoming poverty, but it is about recovering the moral capacity of a country. And these women have taken that on board.
Yes. Okay, we're running out of time, so just to wrap up a little bit. I think that, I mean, being a negotiator, we always say is good negotiators are not deal makers. They're really concerned about the implementation and the sustainability of agreements. And I think that's where my sister's been talking about, that that's the challenge Colombia has. We have to create a sustainable post-conflict in terms of economics, and I think we're going to capture what we call the peace dividend in terms of stronger institutions. Peace makes it more attractive to investors to come to Colombia. We will be able, hopefully, to benefit, to bring down inequality. In terms of social, which is what Elvira Maria has been talking about, the challenge of social sustainability and capturing the social dividend, moving from violence and corruption to prosperity and collaboration. Environmental sustainability, because we have a beautiful country with incredible biodiversity. Maybe we can tap into ecotourism, is that? So, but I think that's our challenge. Right now, our challenge, and maybe 7 years from now, we'll do another session, and we tell you about how we manage the transition to the post-conflict. So thank you very much.
Muchas gracias, Pablo. y
Gracias.
Elvira.
Excelente español.
De nada. You talk, Pablo, about solving dilemmas. That is what innovation is about. Often we're not even really sure what the dilemma is that we need to be solving. We run at solutions too quickly. And I think just that 20-minute conversation, we understand that there isn't that much that we really understand about a conflict, a situation as complex as the one that Colombia has faced for the past 20 years. So changing the paradigm of the way we think about what are the priorities for the people, the victim as the customer, very interesting approach. This is a change in the paradigm. By healing others, they heal themselves. We see this in many realms. And how do you mobilize people when the paradigm is shifting from conflict to peace to make that happen?